societies, fascist societies. What is the hallmark of a fascist society? Anybody have an idea about this? What's the hallmark of that kind of a society? What's that?
Like a dictator.
Okay, that the people give over a lot of their individuality and rights to the state and conform to the state's rules. So the state sets the rules, we all conform to the rules. So it's a highly centralized, highly focused kind of life. And a lot of people wondered, why would anybody give over their powers to this state like this? And so this was kind of democracies against fascism going on there. Democracy where people had voice, people had power, versus the centralized authority of the state. There were also other societies that were trying to create a different kind of setting, right? They were the communist societies, which were where? You had Russia, Soviet Union, and you had China. Okay, so you had China and Soviet Union. We're trying to do communist societies. What's the kind of governing thing going on in a communist society? Okay, that everyone is on the same level, there's no classes, and everyone produces for the good of all. So this was the idea of communism, that we would get rid of owners and workers, we'd all own the means of production, that everybody would work according to their ability, and everyone would receive according to their need. This was the communist ideal. And that came out of the writings of Karl Marx, who said that there was a flow to history, and the flow of history was that capitalism is an oppressive economic system where you have owners and workers, and the owners get rich and the workers get taken advantage of. So Marx said that eventually this would collapse and we would have communism in its place, because this was the inevitable flow where we would no longer have this imbalance of classes. We would now have equality, and everyone would have what they needed because everybody worked as hard as they could to provide for the community, and everyone only took what they needed. How'd that work? Didn't work too well, right? Okay, so somewhere that broke down. And people like Stuart Hall look at this and they ask the question, why did this not happen? Why didn't this happen? Now, we're looking at it today from further on than Stuart Hall did. And we recognize that people took advantage of this, you know, and accumulated personal wealth and took advantage of others. So we recognize that. But Stuart Hall was trying to figure this out, and he said the reason this didn't happen is because of the culture industry. He says the reason that capitalism didn't just collapse under its own unjust weight was that there arose this mass popular culture that was produced by factories and marketed in the media, and it convinced people that this was what they wanted and this was how they should live. And so the culture industry prevented people from being in touch with their real condition. And the idea of being out of touch with your real condition was known as having a false consciousness. And being subject to here's a long word for you, hegemonic ideology. So the idea became, for people like Hall and others, that what's going on in society is that people are really suffering. Things are not going well for a lot of people in society. But that doesn't produce enough steam to change things, because the mass of people think everything is fine and they are doing exactly what they want to do, which is to buy things so they can take on an identity and feel like their life has, value and purpose because they've bought this identity. So they just keep buying the new identities that come along. It has to change all the time. Fashion has to change all the time. Identities have to change all the time. If we get a counter-cultural thing, we have to absorb it and make it part of our mass popular culture. And in the end, we keep this system going. Some people get rich, other people get subjected to bad conditions. So Hall is asking the question, how does the media perpetuate these things that allow an unjust social condition to continue to exist? So Hall is really what we call a critical theorist, right? The idea, this is different from being critical like you don't like your boss at work. This is critical, meaning it asks questions about power and privilege and oppression and marginalization in society. So this is a very socially oriented theory. Now, Phillipson's speech code theory is not like this, is it? Does Phillipson's speech code theory tell you anything about the way things ought to be? No, it doesn't say this is good, this is bad. It just describes the way speech codes are. So Phillipson's theory is more of a descriptive theory that wants to give you ideas about how to work with these different codes you encounter. Hall's theory is a whole different ballgame where he says this is bad, media promotes this, and we need to unmask this. We need to wake up to what is happening to us through the mass media and through advertisements and through production of all of these different commodities that we spend our whole lives trying to achieve and trying to get. And meanwhile, we're missing the whole point of what life, according to Hall, might be. We're so wrapped up in making somebody else rich because we're spending our money on what they want us to buy. Any thoughts or comments about that? Ken?
Does that mean to be like a true outsider then? You have to cut off all connection to the media? I mean, if
no.
what Hall proposes is true.
No, he says that through cultural studies, you can become aware of this, and by becoming aware of it, you escape its grip on you. So you don't have to opt out of everything, but you can negotiate the meaning. So for instance, he will talk about, where's my notes? At the end of his chapter, here's the audience. Here you are the audience. You know, you're people receiving the message that's being projected by the culture industry and the media, the mass media. Message is coming at you. You can read this. So he talks about reading. And the question is, how do you read this? He says you can read it in the within. What first is according to the dominant code. So if you read an advertisement according to the dominant code, you look at it, you look at the happy people with the product, you look at the colors, you look at their having fun, they're together with friends, and you say, wow, this is a great thing. I'm going to get into this. I'm going to buy my way into this life. If I get that commodity, I'll have happy friends and we'll be doing fun things too. So that's...
There's a lot of people that, like he mentioned Crocs before,
right.
One way or the other, they just go out and buy the product because it's popular. And then there are other people that look at it and say, you know, like, wait a minute now, they're kind of ugly, they're a lot of money, and they're just making a lot of money off of everybody going out to buy these Crocs. I don't have to do that.
Well, that's what he called a negotiable or negotiated code. So at that point, you're saying, well, all right, maybe I want to buy them, maybe I don't. You know, maybe they're good sneakers, maybe they're not good sneakers. Maybe it's not worth the fuss of not having the in thing to wear with my friends, and so I'll buy it. So you're not totally caught up in the dominant code, but you're negotiating it. You're playing with it. And then other people can read it as an oppositional code. They can read it from an oppositional code. So they look at it and they say, aha, another attempt of the culture industry to get me to commodify my life and buy things, you know, and so I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to go down to dollar store and I'm going to buy, you know, fake Crocs, tennis sneakers, knockoff Crocs, right? And I'm going to buy, you know, sandals, and I'm just going to wear them, and I'm going to reject the whole push of the popular culture and the culture industry. So Kian's answer is you don't have to get out of everything. Hall's answer is you want to think about how you receive that media. And Hall's issue is with people who just receive it according to the dominant code, and they are just constructed by the mass popular media, the mass culture, popular culture. And you know, I don't know about, you may have younger brothers or sisters. I know kids in junior high today, you know, and I'm getting the feeling from them that there's more pressure today on stuff than probably when you were in junior high. There's some huge pressures going on right now about having the right commodities. You know, you got to have the right stuff, or you're going to be ostracized, you're going to be laughed at, you're going to be, what's that?
A loser.
Yeah, you're going to be a loser. Why? Because you don't own the commodities of the culture industry. Something is wrong with that, Hall says.
It was like that in my school.
Yeah, right.
But I think we also do a lot of looking at different things. Like everybody has designer bags. Well, the Prada's up here 500 to 700. But now if we go down to like Coach level, you're in a whole different ballgame. But you have a designer purse that everybody looks at and says, that's a really nice purse, and I know she spent at least 200 on it.
So Hall wants to ask the question, how does that happen, that it gets into the minds of people that we've got to have these things in order to have value as human beings, in order not to be a loser, in order to be in... How does media participate in that process, which is a communication issue? So that's why it's a communication theory for us.
It also happens with like holidays and stuff, like Valentine's Day becomes like this.
Yeah, all right. Like, yeah, the stores are already set up for Thanksgiving and Christmas already, which is like, what happened, you know? Well, what happened is we're in a commodity culture. All right, so, Prue?
Is this function of subcultures being absorbed, is that a function of a culture or all cultures? I mean, is it something that always occurs naturally, or is it just...
Well, you know, Hall is not addressing that question. And this is where theories address certain questions. Hall is trying to figure out what happened to what should have happened.
Well, he's assuming that communism should have happened.
That's precisely the point. Hall comes out of a Marxist tradition that says the natural progression should have been for capitalism to collapse. It didn't. Why didn't it? Because mass media, we didn't figure in our picture on mass media and production, the culture industry, clouding people's minds over so much, getting them to buy into a commodification of life, that so we don't know where this is going now. But we see people's lives being taken over by commodification. So,
well, I think what he's saying could be true because, like in countries where the media is controlled, like you see socialism kind of taking over.
right,
Like Venezuela.
right.
And the capitalist ideas are like kind of controlled. So what he's saying is really happening today.
So in Venezuela, is it a rise of capitalism, are you saying, or it's a push down of capitalism?
Well, it's like not so much communism, but like socialism.
Right.
Very similar. And that's...
That the media has a huge power to create an ideology or a set of ideas that people have about life and the world that becomes the ruling set of ideas that then leads them into a certain interaction.
Their media is not pushing so much of the buy this or like a capitalist like America. So that's where the communism or an equal everybody being equal is kind of
Right.
falling into play.
Okay, so let me get this. So in Venezuela, the media is supporting the move towards communism.
Yeah.
Okay, so Hall would be very interested to look at how the media do that.
Yeah.
That from a communication perspective, he would ask, what kind of a ideology are they promoting and who benefits from it? Hall sees industries benefiting from this. So that's his criticism of it.
I also feel this way, like, let's say for instance you raise your kids at home, okay? It wouldn't matter if they wore Wrangler jeans or blah, 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 blah. As soon as we go to school, and I don't only mean elementary school because it is also big in elementary school,
Right.
but college, you're entrenched in the mass seeing of others acting a certain way. Like, oh wow, you know, as soon as you see a necklace, you'll say, oh, I know that's a Tiffany necklace, okay? It's not a knockoff and this and that. And I also think it gives people, I don't know if you want to call it a false sense, but a sense of confidence and power when you have the better things.
It's all part of this.
You feel better in it. You know, I'm wearing a Tiffany
Right.
necklace. I got a big engagement ring. Whatever it is, I got a Prada
Right.
bag. We
Yeah.
all are capable and also accessible to these things.
Right.
And it makes us feel good.
And as college students, this is part of your education, is to become a critical consumer of mass media. So that you ask the question, what is this doing to me? What is this doing to my world? What is this doing to my friends, my society, my culture? So you don't just read it according to the dominant code, but you become negotiated or oppositional, which is why universities are targets of...
The big wave you
Right.
drew there, we're all in that
Right.
big wave of it.
Yeah. And it just keeps coming.
Right.
And as soon as this one's done, the next one comes along.
Isn't this all tied into technology? Because before
Well, right.
media had the scope that it has now, people did not have access to trends, to being sold things en masse. I
Right.
mean, to me, it all correlates to the development of media.
Yeah, technology.
Face it.
Yeah, which again raises the question of whether the internet is breaking this up. You know, breaking up the hegemonic ideology. Because for a while, the media was pretty limited. You had a couple of radio stations, you had a couple of television stations, you had a couple of magazines and newspapers. So if you controlled those, you had pretty well gotten the picture going for people. But now we're in this proliferation of publications, of blogs, of internet, of social networking, of all these things. And so it becomes another question that Hall will have to deal with, or he's gone. I mean, he's past his work now, but what kind of a world is this new technology going to allow from a mass media perspective?
Like my little sister's 14.
Yeah.
She'll come home like right out of school and she'll be on the computer until she goes to bed.
Yeah.
Like we won't see her. And like I feel like I don't know, when I was her age, like I didn't even know what like I don't know, Coach was or like anything like that. My mom would dress me in like orange shorts, like red shoes, I don't know, like crazy stuff. And, like my sister, she's all about memes. Like everything. Like we went to the flea market the other day, like Continental, and she saw like a bag or something and she's like, oh, you could tell it's fake. And I'm like, I have to teach her that it's like, you know, she's not like, it's not a bad thing to have something fake, you know, because you spend so much money on like these purses and you're just going to throw them to the ground and like, you know, get them dirty anyway. So it's kind of like I have to show her that it's just
But that's
not
very
cool
interesting. Why, and you all can maybe struggle with this a little bit, why is it with the proliferation of media channels that may be getting worse?
Because you constantly see it. Like if you're on the computer all day, you see so many different pop-up ads and like.
I don't know. Let me get some other comments. Anybody else want to? How about my music group back there? Any thoughts about what's going on? I mean, because from a music perspective, I was just reading an article about you know, social networking sites, Facebook and MySpace and all, and bands that get viral marketing, and they get a song out, and it just explodes through the social networks. So what is that going to do to this issue of, or has mass popular culture just kind of exploded into this whole thing now?
Technology takes you to other places. Like I know, talking about bags, in our office, one girl had gotten a bag and everybody loved it. The first thing they did was go on the internet and try to find that bag cheaper.
Right.
And now there's 3 people in my office that have that same bag in different colors.
Right.
But like I said, it was at their fingertips to do this. Why pay full
Maybe
price?
it's going to make this more powerful.
I think it will,
Yeah.
and does.
Kim, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was going to agree with that. I was saying with especially with computers, and my little sister is in the same situation. I think it's an added social pressure with social networking sites, because you don't, at school you have this social pressure prevalent, but then when you come home it continues with social networking sites. With AOL Instant Messenger, you're still constantly being social with the same large group of people, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't have a scientific survey of this, but I'm observing it and I'm hearing it from you too. You know, that the 14-year-olds, the junior high kids today, this is a stronger force in their life than it was 10 years ago. Yeah. So that's interesting to think about.
I was just gonna say, like in high school, like just for like my own high school, like you go there and it's like people. I always felt pressured by like people that I was with, like never really like the media. Well, like I guess the media, but I was always like you see like celebrities, you know they have like millions of dollars more than you. But when you go to your school and you're with the same peers as yourself, you feel like, well, why did mommy and daddy get to buy them that and I don't have it? So it's like pressure in the household for your parents to buy stuff for you.
Okay.
So I feel.
Yeah. Celebrity culture.
Like I just feel like we know they're rich. Like it's like we want what we see, but it's like I don't know. I feel like you want what you friends because it's more realistic.
But again, see, that's the theory question asks us why. What is going on? And part of what we're hearing is that there's this a fear of being ostracized, fear of being on the out.
I was just going to comment on that too. It's interesting because I forget what the percentage is, but it's something like a very high percentage of Americans live just above the poverty line.
Yes.
And it's, you know, it's because we are so involved in like consuming all these expensive things.
Right.
Why are you going to go out and spend $500 on a bag that you really don't have the $500 to be spending on it, but you're doing it anyway, you know? It's just interesting how it relates to,
Right.
you know, everyone's pretty much poor, you know, in this country. I mean, not poor, but like I said, just above poverty line, just making money.
Right.
But, you know, you go into the household and it's like, who's got the designer this, and like, you
But
know.
it's a case of prestige too.
Well, what she's talking about is what's called the missing class. There are 50 million people who earn between $20,000 and $40,000 a year. And there's a new book out from Princeton professor on this. And she's saying that there's 50 million people in this bucket. Now, you think about how many people in the United States, 350 million, so that's a lot of people are in this bucket. And they keep, and it only takes one thing to push them over. And this book tells 14 stories of these families. And a number of the families is that story. They claw their way up out of the social welfare system. They get out of being on public assistance. And then they start to want to be achieving this goal. And so they get into debt. And then it drags them back in. Right? So Hall would say this is a damaging idea to have in your mind. When if they didn't have that idea, they could probably continue this rise out of this dangerous zone. This is what she calls the, you're slippery in here. You're going to fall back if one thing goes wrong.
As far as salary?
Yeah. You got to be up into the 50s to 60s to be stable in this society. So, right.
Car dealerships work on that prestige. In other words,
It's like
the house could be falling down.
buy to own.
You got to have a Jaguar like Sting does, right?
Buy to own, so we'll get you for exorbitant interest rates.
Yeah. And it reflects who you are.
Right. So Hall gets upset about that. He's an angry communication scholar. He's not like a guy just looking at stuff. He's really angry.
Like when I was going to say something, like she said, there's this town kind of near me, and there's some houses there, but it's a majority of like trailers. And there's a wait list to get in because it's so cheap, and people label people living in the town like white trash.
Right.
It's trailers. But you'll see them living in a trailer, and then they're rolling around in like a hooked up Escalade or Mercedes because no one really knows where they live. But if you see them driving around the streets, they're in this brand new, gorgeous car that they could show off.
See, Hall says this is what's going on. They don't realize what would be in their own best interest. They're accepting their interests from the mass culture that is supported by media that aims at this because it benefits by it. So it's a social critique. This is very much a social critique. This is probably the strongest social critique theory we've hit so far. We'll hit a couple others. I mean, Kramer with her muted group theory was angry about women, but Hall is very angry about culture and media and what goes on. So what do you do with this theory? What is the end result? What does theory do? It describes, it explains, it predicts, and it transforms. It gives you opportunities for transformation. So what is the goal of Hall's theory? What does he want to have happen because you know this?
You could read the message, you could look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah, he wants you to be a person who negotiates the message, who reads it in different ways, who doesn't just accept the dominant reading of this message. So you want to become a person who challenges it and maybe challenges that media and helps others to read it in other ways.
Isn't it also an ethical question to media itself?
Yeah.
How it uses its own power?
Yes. Yes, it is very much strongly an ethical question addressed to the culture industry. What are you doing to people? And what are you doing to society? But, again, I don't know how many of you work in these industries, but people that I've been personally acquainted with who've worked up into these industries, it's a very nasty world. It's a very nasty world about money and sales and profit. So it's not necessarily a highly ethical world you're dealing with.
I had a career in marketing, and one of the reasons I left was because I couldn't see spending my life energy creating a market for useless, violent thought-provoking products, like violent video.
Yeah, so you're in this, you had a ethical issue, you saw some of the effects of it, and you removed yourself from it, right? Yeah. There are people who are able to begin to make changes, and there are stories of people who, but that's often in the food industry rather than in the some of these fashion or music industries.
It's weird because we're learning this in communications, but like there's some schools out there that advertising falls under communications, and wouldn't advertising be like media related and everything? Yeah. So it's kind of like an oxymoron almost, like we're talking about how like the internet's always not that great and all this stuff, but yet advertising is through the internet.